Well, happy Father's Day. My eldest daughter, who lives down in Christchurch, flicked me a text this morning, knowing that dads are renowned for lots of things, and one of the things they're just like world famous for is, of course, their dad jokes. So in the text that she sent me, she thought she would give me a new joke. I hadn't heard this one before. Do you want to hear it? You don't have to hear it. She said this: why don't they have Father's Day sales? Because fathers are priceless. Good. I really like that one. Now, dads, obviously, dad jokes is one thing they're known for, but a bit of hard work. There's dads out there tend to enjoy or at least step into a bit of hard work, and maybe that's appropriate today because we're talking about probably our hardest topic yet as we continue into this relationship series that we're in. As we look at how do we move into healthier, thriving relationships, and we're calling it relation slips because, well, the experience we all have tends to be one where we slip up in relationships, right? And that's not just true for dads, though perhaps dads are more on the mess up, slip up end of things more than most. But so far in our series, if you think about where we've been at, we've been looking at a lot of different skills. The skill to master healthy expectations, the skill for conflict resolution, the skill last week around vulnerability and what we do to let ourselves be known. But here's the thing: you can actually do really well in all of those skills. But if you don't have what we're looking at today, this week's skill, all of those become somewhat muted. Today we're looking at forgiveness. And I believe that forgiveness is the bedrock of every healthy, thriving relationship. Whether you're talking about what happens at home, at work, and with the barista that gets your coffee or doesn't quite get your coffee order right, it's just true for all of those things that we experience. Because here's the truth. You can have great communication skills, but they won't matter if you don't get this one. All your healthy boundaries won't protect you. All your vulnerability will feel like a mistake. Forgiveness is so needed. Now, all of us have a common feeling when the whole day seems to get derailed, right, by someone else's action. So maybe someone, you flick somebody a text and they don't reply, and then you see them on social media, and it's like, so you don't have time to reply to your text, but you've got time to put like a photo of your meal up on social media. Clearly, you've got your phone. Why don't you reply to me? I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Or you get one of those emails, one of those things that just get under your skin, that passive-aggressive email, the ones that, it's like a self-righteous kind of tone to it, and you're there going, what in the world? Why have I got this? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Or worse, you have a family member who owes you money, and then you see their posts about their holiday in Vanuatu, and you're like, so the tourism sector over there can get my money, but you can't pay me? I'm okay, sweet, sure, that's okay with me. These little things, they stack up, right? But it's not just the little things that stack up, there are these big things as well. The ones that like drill holes into our heart and like set up camp there. The friend who disappeared when you needed them the most. The person who lied about you, talked to others about you, ruined, trashed your reputation. If you're in high school, you know how that group chat roasting can, suddenly flick you out of all communication and relationship, all because of that one thing that you said or did. Suddenly you're done. Or it might be that moment that you discover that the person that you loved has been lying to your face. And it's like sickness, in your stomach as you realize that things haven't been right. You've been kind of like played for months, even years. And of course, there's a lingering shadow of abuse, whether we're talking about like spiritual abuse or physical or emotional abuse. It just seems impossible to heal. Impossible to heal. So some of you right now, even as you kind of like just start to hear some of those things, there are these points where you're starting to feel like this tightness in your chest, that all familiar feeling, that there are a whole lot of layers, whole lot of things that probably come to mind right now. And what does this topic look like as we step into? Because here's again the reality. You can do everything right. You can communicate clearly. You can set healthy boundaries. You can, let yourself get known and vulnerable. But we get hurt because it's not just that on our end, we can do everything right around healthy relationships, but other people step in and hurt us. It could be people at work. It could be people at home. It could be the barista who gets our coffee. And suddenly that hurt turns into bitterness, and we carry that bitterness at home. We carry it to family dinners, to the gym, on the motorway. We take it out on our spouse. We take it out on our kids, our colleagues. Again, the barista at the cafe hears about it too. Even your cat and dog don't escape what you're feeling. It impacts everything. And so today's message, it might be difficult to hear. I want to just warn us around that. And I can't promise that every bit of bitterness that we're kind of feeling, every ounce of hurt that's been done to us is going to be solved in the next 30 minutes or so. I can't promise that. But what I can invite you into is a step today towards health, where you start to let go of that bitterness of what that person, what that group, what that organization did to you. So like I said, it's going to be hard work, but I believe it's healthy work. It's good and right work. So where do we start with something so difficult? Well, I reckon the best place to begin is to hear what God says around this topic of forgiveness. And I realize some of you connecting today, still exploring faith, and it's fabulous that you're here. We love the fact that people every Sunday, connect with us and trying to explore who Jesus is and what that means in your life. And so this might be new information to you, but forgiveness is actually a uniquely Christian way of life. If you go back a couple of thousand years ago and you see the ethics that Greece or Rome kind of developed, you won't find forgiveness in that list. It didn't really kind of appear really until Jesus started to teach around forgiveness and unpack what the full impact of what that means for us. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that it's just Christians who forgive or are meant to forgive, but it does have its roots that go right back to Jesus. And if you just sum up his teaching, it really comes back to this, that God calls every one of us to forgive without exception. Now, Paul was one of the early followers of Jesus, and was like a church planter going around a whole bunch of different places planting churches. And then he started to write letters to people. We have them in the New Testament of our Bibles. And he starts to talk about what healthy relationships look like. And in that, he starts to unpack particular details about forgiveness. So Paul writes this, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Forgiveness has everything to do with healthy relationships and the way we treat each other. In a similar way, he wrote to this church in the city of Colossae and says, make allowance for each other's faults, because people have a lot of faults. Forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, again, similar words, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Now, you might kind of, when you read this, think, well, what does Paul know about hurt? He doesn't experience hurt like I have. But when you kind of unpack what Paul went through, he's been beaten, he's been imprisoned unfairly, he's gone through a whole lot of stuff in his life, and yet he's also learned that healthy life, you just need to forgive, and you need to somehow move on and not allow bitterness to stew in your heart. And so this same man who had experienced hurt learned a thing or two about forgiveness. For one, he knew that forgiveness is necessary. It's necessary because even though you might be stepping out and great skills and relationships, other people will hurt you. They'll betray you, they'll say things about you, they'll do things to you that hurt you. You'll feel dishonored, disrespected, dismissed, forgotten, left foolish. And you'll be hurt. And so forgiveness is necessary because the world is a broken place. And also forgiveness doesn't happen naturally. It just doesn't. We actually need to make this conscious choice and step into this pathway. It's often not like a one-off thing. It's this series of decisions we make, but it's a conscious choice or choices we need to make on this journey. And I love that the metaphor that Paul gives to us to help us understand what forgiveness might look like. And it's found in that famous love chapter. You might have heard this read at like a wedding in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And Paul says this, love keeps no record of being wronged. Which is kind of another way of saying love forgives. It's just he picks up on this accounting image here. That if you want to be a loving person, if you want to grow to express love to others, forgiveness is at the heart of it, this bedrock to it all. And so in this accounting language, I have here a 1980s, Casio printing calculator till I have no idea what you call these things, but they're pretty cool. Where, the old school, it's like you just keep all record of a whole range of different things. And so Paul says here, love keeps no record of being wronged. But what do we tend to do when we're wrong, or when we've been wronged to us, when we get hurt? Well, we tend to keep a record of it. So imagine this device here kind of keeping a record of all the things that have been said or done to us that hurt us. It just gets a lot, doesn't it? Well, we start to think back and go, oh, you promised that you would take care of that car registration, and then you went off on that conference and you left me to deal with it. I'm remembering it. It's down here on the list. Now, again, that list might not be some black book that somebody has, though some people do have those things. But most of us is still here, but it's down here. We remember every bit. In fact, I can recall the time that you haven't just done this once, but I can see back here that in 2019 you did the same thing. You went off to that conference. You left me with that car registration. Or it might be, I remember you said that you would get the report to me on Monday. It didn't come. I had to present something, and I was the one that looked foolish. I'm writing it down. It's right here. Or you forgot the anniversary. I'm putting this down here. In fact, when I go through it, you forgot it back in 2021 and 2023, and you've done it again. It's all there, right? This is what we go through in life. And then, of course, there are these other bits. March the 5th, 2023, broke my trust. It's like these other things, and some of them are unspeakable. We just feel the pain of something, don't we? And we can look at a piece of paper, and it doesn't look like much in itself. But it's like when it's here, and when there's a list of stuff that's been done to us, we feel the weight of it. In fact, many times you feel, you can see that weightiness in people, often like hunched over as this baggage of a lot of stuff that's happened in life. And anything on that list, it might be a name that comes to, that somebody says, or it might be an event or a date, and it's like this trigger point where you start to feel all of those things again. And here's the thing. It's not just you that has a list of things that have been done to you, and you keep your list of all these things that are done wrong, but other people have a list of you as well. And so they're carrying their list, long or short, whatever it looks like, where you have said things, you have done things, and it might be the barista who gets the coffee for you, and you're always like complaining. It could be somebody at home, it could be somebody at work, but every relationship you're in, people have a list of things that you have done too. You see, this is why Jesus is calling us to realize that God calls everyone to forgive without exception. And it's why a conversation where you might be like buying outdoor furniture suddenly leads to this argument over what you said about his parents, 13 years ago. Or he never seems to remember anything he needs to get from the supermarket, but somehow he seems to recall, the 331 times you've rolled your eyes at him. Or it might be, this leader who used to be a particular person, but suddenly all these things come to mind, and there's just like this bitterness that has this barrier to everything they do. Now, I know some of you are thinking, you've kind of heard of this before. Let's just forgive and move on. But there are reasons why people kind of get stuck in this place. And I think it's healthy for us just to kind of sit with this. And even though it might be uncomfortable and hard today, just to reflect on some of those objections. So here are four that I'm hearing quite a bit. Objection number one: doesn't this enable further offense? Have you noticed, for instance, that we live in what I would call like an honor and shame culture here in New Zealand, increasingly? Because what I'm noticing is that whenever the subject of forgiveness comes up, there's increasingly pushback. Where people say, if you forgive, it's going to create this dangerous society where people are no longer held accountable. And so instead, what do we tend to do? We start to move towards canceling out that person or that organization. So whether it comes from, the Me Too movement, or a toxic work environment, or a politician or leader that, did whatever in life, or where something's happened, where somebody has been betrayed, even the very notion of forgiveness starts to, in people's minds, create this dangerous precedent. Welcome to the new honor and shame society that we have. In fact, in his brilliant book entitled Forgiveness, the late Timothy Keller says this: forgiveness is seen now as radically unjust and impractical, as short-circuiting the ability of victims to gain honor and virtue as others rise to defend them. And so this culture is littered with enormous numbers of broken and now irreparable relationships. See, friends, forgiveness doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. When Jesus forgave people, he didn't say, oh, it doesn't matter at all. Yeah, he said to them, go and sin no more. Forgiveness very much acknowledges that wrong was done. It just decides to choose to say, I'm not going to seek vengeance on you. And perhaps it's important to see a difference between justice and vengeance. You know, justice restores the moral order, protects society. Vengeance is all about satisfying our personal hunger for payback, to make them hurt, to pay them back, that they would feel exactly what we're feeling. You see, remove forgiveness from society and you don't get more justice, you just get a vindictive society. You get this harsh, self-righteous moralism that just gets stuck. But forgiveness is so needed for healthy people in a healthy, thriving society. So that's the first objection. Objection number 2. But this denies the real hurt was done. But in fact, the opposite is true. But genuine forgiveness acknowledges the depth of pain. You see, to forgive someone, you actually need to come to a point where you say, I was wronged, and it hurts. And if there is nothing that you feel, it's likely that actually it's just an offense you can pass over. It doesn't require forgiveness. But if you can feel something, it's because you were wronged. Something terrible happened to you that should never have happened to you. But that's why we need to forgive. It's often for our sake, not for the sake of the other person. Now, let me also just correct a misunderstanding we often have here, that we often think forgiveness requires forgetting. And much of that is because we know God chooses to forget things, that we have done. But when it comes to us, I've certainly found in my own life, I don't tend to be able to forget things where people have hurt me. I really like the book called The Shack. In that book, where a person's gone through terrible, unspeakable things in their life, the person in the book writes this comment here: forgiveness is not about forgetting, it's about letting go of the other person's throat. It's about choosing not to seek revenge, seeking vengeance, but you're still remembering what happened. We can't really forget those things where things happen to us. But what I'm finding helpful is to think about, well, what is sin and the mess and the slip-ups? And I think it's helpful to think of them as like a debt that needs to be paid. So, same with our accounting imagery for a bit. Let's imagine that your friend has just broken your lamp. Let's say it's worth $100. So really there's like 2 options in that place. Either they pay for the lamp or you pay for the lamp. That's how it tends to work. Now, we kind of understand that when it comes to like a debt with something being broken, but all things are like debts in our lives. Somebody has stolen our happiness. They have stolen our reputation. They've robbed us of an opportunity. And that's something that you can never, ever get back. It's still kind of like a form of debt that needs to be paid. And again, there's only 2 options going forward. Either they pay or you pay. And so let's think about what happens when you demand that they pay. One way is that you rob them of the happiness that they robbed from you. Or you make them pay for it in some way and you cancel them out and you seek revenge or you do whatever you need to do. That's one option. But in that option, no one ever actually wins. Sometimes they go living their best life and seem to be immune to it, but it really hurts you. We're going to unpack that a bit more in a moment. Option 2, of course, is you pay for it. You decide, actually, I'm not going to collect. I'm not going to turn your friends against you. I'm not going to destroy you on social media. I'm not going to cancel you out. But it's never simple. That's hard work, conscious choice where you're saying, I'm going to pay the debt as costly as it is myself. But please never say forgiveness is simple, because it never denies your hurt. Something happened, hard to forget, but it's there. And then there's objection number 3. But they never even apologized. I hear this in wider society, here particularly in Christian circles. Well, why should I forgive? They never even acknowledge that they did anything wrong. What I've discovered, though, is that this tends to be, in my mind, a convenient teaching that makes bitterness acceptable. Let me kind of unpack that, because it might sound a bit harsh, but when I look at the life of Jesus and see what he did in his teaching, I think of the time that some friends of a paralytic brought their friend to Jesus. They even dug a hole in the roof to get them to Jesus because there's a big crowd. And Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. The guy didn't even ask for his sins to be forgiven, but Jesus proactively responds to what he sees as his biggest need. There's another story when a woman who had a lot of stuff in her past came to wash the feet of Jesus. She never asked for forgiveness, but Jesus says to her, your sins are forgiven. Again, the whole context, the whole story, she doesn't say a word. And then I think, of course, about when Jesus is on the cross and he's hanging there, he's been crucified, it's a brutal scene, and the very people that have crucified him, he says from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And I just think if Jesus can model to us through his teaching and his life in the midst of incredible pain, forgiveness, even when it hasn't been asked for, I think it shows us we're meant to do this even for our own sake. Of course, there's one more objection that comes up too. But what about reconciliation? Many times we assume that forgiveness and reconciliation have to go together, but actually they don't. Reconciliation requires two healthy people to come to an understanding and work in their relationship, but sometimes it's actually just you. Reconciliation needs two healthy, willing people. Forgiveness just needs you. So consider a dating couple heading towards engagement. And she suddenly discovers that he's been lying to her the whole time and he's been pursuing one of her friends. It's over. He might send flowers, he might send a whole lot of cards with apology messages promising to change. And she can choose to forgive him, but it doesn't mean that she has to get back together with him. Forgiveness isn't permission to re-enter your life. Some people are toxic, some people are dangerous. Forgiveness doesn't mean having to reinstate them into their job or back into your organization or into your life. Sometimes you actually have to walk away. See, we're actually called to forgive, but we're not commanded to reconcile. Instead, Paul, which we heard from earlier, he says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Notice that important phrase, as far as it depends on you. So you do what you need to do in that kind of pursuit of healthy relationship, but sometimes it's not entirely up to you. And so you can forgive while actually maintaining the wisdom to keep that person away from your children, your money, your heart. Forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. So those are 4 objections. But I think here's the one that we really, here's the core of the issue, this one here. Why would I even want to forgive? Sometimes the scale of what has happened to us, why would I want to forgive with that person, that group has hurt me so deeply? So let me just say it out loud on behalf of all of us. Holding a grudge feels good. Anyone know what I mean? Anyone kind of feel what I feel at times? It's so easy to fantasize about something. When you start to picture that person walking into a room, and it's like everything comes out of what that person did, and they're going to be shamed, and you're going to be honored and defended, and people are going to rally around you, and it feels good. And often that memory or that grudge is almost like the only power you have over them. And so we nurse it for all that we've got. It's not the way of Jesus. And here's why. No one wins when we hold that grudge, no one. And you might think that when you do so, you're hurting them, but you just end up hurting yourself. As someone wisely said, bitterness is the poison you drink, hoping the other person will drop dead. It's insane what we do, isn't it? That you don't just hold on to pain, but pain starts to hold on to you, and it has a tight grasp. It's the slow-working poison that month 1 you feel justified. You move into month 6 and you feel tired. And then by year 3, you're looking in the mirror and the image you see staring back at you, you're like, how did I become that person? But that's what bitterness tends to do to us. It affects our relationships. It affects our conversations. We actually become the very type of person that we're not willing to forgive, and suddenly we start to become that kind of toxic, hardened person who can't trust other people anymore. But do you realize what bitterness does to your brain and to your body? I've been reading recently how various neuroscientists have discovered that angry, resentful thoughts actually release these chemicals into our brains. Have you heard this before? And it's like we go through these like chemical tantrums, they call them, where it creates in the nerve cells these emotional black holes, is one of the phrases some of the neuroscientists use. So in that space, you had like joy and peace there before, all these like happy memories, and suddenly it's replaced by bitterness and by a grudge. That's what it does to our brain chemistry. That's what happens to our brain. Think about what it does to our whole body. You see, our bodies often can't tell the difference between a real threat and the threat that we continue to rehearse in our mind of what happened to us. And so we can lie in bed 11 p.m. safe at home, but our body starts to go into a fight or flight mode because we're constantly reliving that hurt that happened to us. And it just leads to a higher blood pressure. It just leads to increased heart disease risk, a weakened immune system, all because of what we're going through. And the person out there might be living their best life while we're here and our brain is going through these emotional black holes in our body, and we're just getting physically sick because of what we're carrying. But here's the incredible part. When you forgive, your brain can actually heal itself, that those emotional black holes can actually fill in again with grace and goodness and joy again when you go through this hard pathway of choosing to forgive. Your brain's actually designed to recover from bitterness when you step into the pathway of forgiveness. See, friends, this is hard. But how you choose to respond to offenses is going to shape the type of person you will become. People who nurse grudges one way become bitter and defensive, and they're quick to recite a whole long list of grievances. But people who choose to forgive, they actually become people who grow up to be gracious and approachable and peaceable and gentle. I've watched bitterness turn mums and dads into sharp, critical people who their own kids and grandkids no longer want to visit. I've seen it turn good leaders that have accomplished a lot, into these like suspicious, lonely people who tend to push everyone away with all the stuff that they talk about. See, what we do with our hurt actually determines who we become. It's no wonder Jesus invites us to consider forgiveness as a healthy pathway forward for all of us, regardless of what's happened to us. So, of course, at this point, the key question is this: how do we actually do it? And I'm very conscious that right in this room, and those of you connecting online, there's a lot of unpacking to do. There's a lot of poison, bitterness, grudges that we have been eating away at our joy, our relationships, our peace. And we're tired of it. We're sick of being angry. We just want our life back. I get it. And again, I can't promise that everything's resolved today. But my hope is that we can take just one step in a significant pathway towards actually beginning to forgive. And some of you are going to need some extra help in this. Might be chatting to a counselor, and we can certainly wanting to help you as a church. We'd be honored to do that in your journey. But here are 3 things I'm finding helpful in my own life as I think about what this pathway looks like. Here's the first step. Step 1, welcome them back into the circle of humanity. I'm borrowing that language from a book here called The Art of Forgiving by Lewis Smedes. Incredible book about trying to help us in this phrase. And he says this, he puts together a circle, next slide, and he says, you've got to welcome people back into the circle of humanity. Because when we think about that person or that group that's hurt us, where do we normally place them? Place them like outside the circle of humanity, right? In fact, they could be like off the screen in terms of what they've done. You know, and it often comes up in our language. When you hear the language, we dehumanize them. You hear in the words we say, he's nothing but a con man. She's pure evil. And what they did, I don't want to deny how terrible and how hard it was, but here's what I'm learning about people. that we're all made in the image of God. And so there are these moments of beauty, but there's also these moments of brokenness. And so often we describe people and we see them as like these one-dimensional people of just brokenness and just evil. And we only think about that worst possible thing and they become defined by that thing forever. What I'm learning is the reality is it's more complicated. We are beautiful and broken. And I think maturity comes when we can actually hold beautiful and broken together about people at the same time. And if you're still defining a person entirely by that worst act in their life, you actually need to bring them back into the circle of humanity. To be able to say, people are complicated, we've all messed up, but I'm willing to actually bring them back into the circle and think of them somehow as made in the image of God. Second step in the pathway. Remember your own need for forgiveness. Let's put up another circle here. Let's think about this one. If this is, circle with sinners, where is it that you place that person or that group that's hurt you? Well, you place them in the circle, right? You place them right in the center of the circle because of what they've done to you. Let me ask you another question. Where do you place yourself? To place yourself outside of the circle, right? And that might be true when you think of the particular situation where they hurt you. Maybe you're not involved in that at all. There's nothing that you did wrong in that situation, because that can happen. But when you think about the bigger aspect of life, what we believe as a Christian community is we're actually in the circle of sinners too. And when you think about what we have done to our Heavenly Father, it's not just a kind of a $100 lamp that we've broken. There's a long, long list of things that we have done in life that have hurt the heart of our Heavenly Father. There's injustice for us as well. This is what we believe as a Christian community. And this is what Paul says. How did God respond to that? How does our Heavenly Father respond? Well, He forgives. But that doesn't happen by just like clicking a finger and making it go away. It comes at a significant cost. So this is what Paul says. God made Jesus, who had no sin, to become sin for us. Now, there's a whole lot in these phrases. It means, first of all, that Jesus stepped into the circle of humanity. He became one of us. And then He chose to step into the circle of sinners and actually take all the vile stuff upon Himself. And just in this room, and those of you connecting online, if you think about it, huge list, horrid stories of all the stuff that Jesus has taken on Himself. And He's chosen to step into that circle of sinners. And this phrase takes us back to the adding machine. Here, this is what Paul says that happens. Christ reconciling the world to Himself, no longer counting people's sins against them. Which means, the Father doesn't just like step in and sees it all and just rips it up and pretends it's not there. But instead, he placed all that list of everything that's been done and He placed it on Jesus. And Jesus dies on this cruel cross. He's killed for you and for me. This is vile as you can possibly go. In a few minutes, we're going to be taking communion together and going to be encouraging you to hold the bread and the cup in your hand as you just remember the cost of forgiveness. Because forgiveness is not cheap. Forgiveness comes at a significant cost. And you see it, when you come to communion and actually realize what Jesus had to do in order to forgive you and me. And I think it's only when we come to understand that that's what He did in order to forgive us, that we can start to go down that pathway of forgiving other people. If He would forgive me like this, well, then I can start to think about the cost of forgiving other people, which is why Jesus encourages us to pray in that simple prayer, forgive us our sins as we would forgive those who sin against us. One comes after the other. So that's the second step. You've welcomed them back into the circle of humanity. You've remembered your own need for grace, knowing that you're also part of that circle of sinners. And the final step, that you would choose to let go of resentment even before there's resolution. Now, if you're like me, you're a person who loves closure. I want to get closure on something. We're all waiting for that moment when the person finally wakes up and realizes how badly they've hurt us, the depth of their depravity. We all love an apology. We love an explanation. We would love some validation. And I don't want to ignore, again, what that person, that group did to you, but I'm encouraging you to begin the process of getting healing from God about what happened. And I get it, you were hurt, and you've got some triggers, and you've got reasons to be done with that person, that group forever. What I'm asking you, though, is what would it look like for you to let go of the resentment even before there's resolution? Because that's at the heart of the Christian message about forgiveness. Letting go means I won't let what they did determine who I become, how I'm going to react and respond to things. Because the alternative, as we've seen, is allowing these like black holes to form in our brains, just having bitterness filling them. And when that happens, laughter starts to go and warmth vanishes, and we just like remain stuck in this moment in time, that date when that happened to us, that thing that person did, that aspect, and we just remain stuck and we can't get out of it. And again, you might need some help to kind of like process what happened there in order for you to move towards this. But friends, you don't just hold on to pain. Pain starts to hold on to you. And it starts to affect every relationship you're in, and it starts to turn people into a person they never thought they would ever become themselves. But it doesn't have to be this way. And I believe these 3 steps are not just like some theory to move us towards forgiveness and towards health, but they're actually practical helps. That's what I'm finding in my own life journey. You know, this is true for me. There are people in my life who have hurt me, who have left me feeling small and slandered and misunderstood, and unfair doesn't even begin to cover it. But despite reaching out as far as it depends upon me, and even though I can't see change in others, at least in this point in time, I've had to make a choice. I've had to make a choice to actually bring those people back into the circle of humanity and no longer see them as just monsters, but actually as people loved by God, made in the image of God. I've had to actually see myself in that circle of sinners and not just see them in it, but actually see myself in that space too, and realize the depth of forgiveness and grace God has given to me. And realize that I have a choice to not carry resentment even without the resolution that I would like. Even when there's no closure, no apology, no justice that I can see, I'm still choosing to step into this pathway of forgiveness. And that's your choice today too. And again, want to highlight this again. Realize some of you here today will need some help in this. It's not just like a one-off thing, decision you just make today, but this is a pathway we walk through, and often things are still coming back to mind, and we just need some help to process that and unpack it with other people. So friends, today's Father's Day. So let me speak to those of you who are dads and granddads here. Because I believe the best gift you can give to your children and grandchildren and spouse and friends and colleagues is to become a forgiving person. Truly believe this. You know, your kids are watching how you handle hurt. They're learning from you, especially when you're under pressure. Will you respond with anger and unforgiveness, or will you respond with grace and forgiveness and peaceability? And the legacy you leave won't actually be about your achievements. It really should be about the type of person you become, how you forgive, how gracious you are, how gentle you are. It's for the dads. And for the rest of you, you know, the best gift you can give to your dad today is to become a forgiving person yourself. To stop carrying grudges that are just eating away your own joy. And I know some of you have deep wounds because of your dads. Perhaps your dad was absent. Perhaps he wasn't who he should have been. He was absent-minded. He was abusive. And maybe Father's Day is just this painful day for you that should be a day of celebration, but it's not. And maybe the person you need to begin to forgive is actually the very man who should have protected you and cherished you the most. And if that's you today, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what you've had to go through. I also want you to know that you can actually step into starting to experience some freedom in life. And it begins by beginning the process to say, I'm not going to let that person